Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another brand new Film Fanatic show. It is 9:49, April 11th on a Saturday morning. Pretty windy. I haven't been outside yet, but it seems super gusty and windy. Maybe a little chilly, but anyway. Other than that, kind of a nice day, but some big clouds rolling through, so the sun gets covered up. It's kind of wild. Like 1 minute it's pretty sunny out, and then the next minute it gets really dark out. But anyway, I hope everyone's doing good. Tonight I'm going to be playing a benefit show. Well, actually, it's kind of a political rally for a bunch of these Democratic candidates here in Maine, and we're going to be playing a show tonight with for this event. It's at the Legion Hall with Bookhead Sweet Tooth, which is a band that I typically play a lot more with during the summer with Troy Youngblood and Dan Miller. Really fun band. Blues. There's definitely blues in the music, or that's a big part of it. It's rock, a little bit of psychedelia. There's a little bit of jazz, and a little bit of funk, and a little bit of there's a lot of improv. But we haven't played a gig in probably since October, so this will be interesting. We haven't played since that time, so this will be our first gig. In the past, we've played a lot, where we've done a couple of nice little tours. We did one big tour about almost 2 years ago now, and we did a tour last year. But we mostly play locally, and it's a lot of fun. So we're doing that tonight. It's at the Legion Hall, and it's free to the public. 7 o'clock. So come on by. I really love the Legion Hall. I played there about a week or two ago. We did a quantum show there with Phil Hummer and the White Falcons, but super cool spot. I really love that Legion Hall. It's got a nice big stage. It can really hold a lot of people too, which is nice. And then you have the bar right there. So anyway, um, yeah, I want to thank again. Got some new subscribers. Also love all the folks who keep commenting on the videos. That's where it's at for me. Absolutely, absolutely love all. I'm all about that interaction. I'm all about the people who are also fellow film fanatics. So really, really, to me that's the greatest aspect of doing this wacky thing. I also did my first smoke break video yesterday outside, which was a first. It was a little chilly, but the first of the season, first outside smoke break video of 2026 where I did it outside. Just kind of a weird little video. It was just kind of a weird little video idea that I did last year. It all kind of started with I did this kind of experimental video with some music and some visuals where I incorporated some masks, and I did this kind of improvised music piece, and it kind of came from there, and it was kind of fun to do. It was this kind of sketched out idea where basically I did this kind of improv music piece where, because I love a lot of kind of fringe music too. I love a lot of harsh noise, and I love a lot of ambient music. So it was kind of, I was listening to a lot of that music, and I listen to that kind of to those styles quite a bit. Groups like Wapstan from Montreal, which is like a kind of more of a harsh noise project, but I really love that music. Pharmacon's another group, and then I also love the ambient stuff from Autechre and Aphex Twin, and so I like listening to so much of that music, and I still do. I had this idea to compose this music that was going to be just totally improvised and just see how it came out. And I remember I recorded it, did a couple of takes. I think I did one or two takes, and it was like I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 minutes. Recorded the audio, and then did this video to accompany it, and it kind of came from there. And I used different kinds of lighting. I love to collect masks, as probably some of you know. I love that. aspect. That's a big thing that I use for Quantum. That's the big one of the big major influences for movies. So I incorporated that with the music playing in the background, and also latex and smoking, and so there's a little bit of David Lynch inspired kind of a visual thing. There's a little bit of the Kink influence. There's also the harsh noise music stuff and kind of the soundtracky kind of vibe from films. So it was kind of fun, and then that kind of spawned me to do these other side little videos, Smoke Break, and that's been kind of fun. And I've gotten some pretty good feedback from it, and it's a weird little odd thing that I like a lot, and just kind of do it, here and there. I do some videos, but I started doing that separate little series, the Smoke Break videos, last year, but I was doing it outside, changing things up, and haven't done any of those kinds of videos for months and months because of the winter, and it's been pretty cold. But yesterday was the first time, so to be outside and doing it, and do those kinds of videos, so it was a lot of fun. Anyway, um, tomorrow I'm going to be going over to my folks for dinner, and of course that comes along with renting movies. So I'm going to rent some movies today. It's funny because for a long, long time, every time I would go over to my folks, I would typically always, and I still do, but most of the time when I'm home, I watch all like a lot of old shit all the time. A lot of grindhouse, low, super low budget, trashy movies. That's mostly what I watch, and I try to stay with, as far as buying Blu-rays, that's what I watch. But I also love big budget movies and quote unquote normal movies. And I go to the movies with friends, and typically that's what it is. Like, because just last week we went to go see Project Hail Mary, which is a very big budget kind of Hollywood movie, which I liked. But there's some things about it that I thought were a little bit, I don't know, a little bit much maybe, but I don't know. But I liked it. I thought it was really good. And I did a review for that. So typically when I go to the movies, I see those kinds of films, like new movies. And then when I go over to my folks, for the longest time, I've always rented brand new movies. Because I remember a few years back, I remember trying, and here it goes. Now it's super dark out again. It's super dark and cloudy, like within 2 seconds. It's so weird. It was just nice and sunny. Anyway, so for years going over my folks, for quite a few years, I always bring over, go to Opera House Video and rent new releases. And that's usually when I would see new films. And occasionally on weekends, I would still rent new movies from them anyway, which I might do anyway because, I love movies. So, but then, and I remember one instance I brought over an older movie and they were totally not into it. And they gave me this impression that, like, oh, we only want to see, when you come over here and bring movies, we only want to see new movies. And I was like, oh, okay. So I've done that for quite a few years. And then just a couple of weeks ago, they were like, oh, no, if you want to bring over older films, that's cool. And we were starting to talk about random movies that we wanted to watch again, older films. So I'm going to rent, and one of the movies that kept coming up was Sea of Love with Al Pacino, which is actually a really cool movie, and I haven't seen it in years. And also Midnight Run with Robert De Niro, which is another classic movie, classic comedy, which I haven't seen in years. So I think I'm going to rent them today. So changing things up. And then, of course, I haven't seen either of those movies for years. I don't own them, but I will definitely do, of course, a little review on those movies because they're awesome movies. But it's been years since I've seen them, so I'm looking forward to seeing them. It'll be on DVD, but I think they have pretty good quality nevertheless. Speaking Speaking of DVDs, I've always said, and I try to stick with it. I try to only rent, or I should say, most of the time when I rent movies, which is at Opera House Video, it's DVDs, mainly because, well, the main reason is my folks do not have a Blu-ray player. They do, but it doesn't really work anymore, so I have to always rent DVDs, and that's fine. Because all of the new releases still manage to mostly get a DVD release when they come out. They have at Opera House Video though. They do have a pretty cool Blu-ray selection. It's gotten better and better. And I sometimes rent movies, certain movies that I've been wanting to see that I think my folks might not be into. I will get on Blu-ray there. I got a movie. Oh, what was the name of it? The Range. Larry. Yeah, the last Blu-ray I got from Opera House Video that I rented was Deranged. Trying to remember now. I'm having a total brain fart. By Larry Fenderson, who is the founder of Glass Eye Pix. Really great director and very pretty interesting movie. He directed this movie years ago, which I think is one of the greatest vampire movies of all time. Habit, really cool movie. So that was the last Blu-ray I got. So, but typically I'll go and get, I always get DVDs. And as far as buying movies, I try to only buy Blu-rays because to me that's the best. I buy a lot of movies. I spend when I do go to the shops, mostly Bull Moose, and I went to Goodwill a couple of weeks ago, and then also I've gotten. I used to go there a lot to Goodwill, and it's funny. I've talked about this a lot, but the way I maybe because I'm just kind of a loser and I'm a nerd and I have no life, but it's probably the case. Is when I typically go to Bull Moose, each Bull Moose is uniquely different. It's funny. They all have a different thing about them. I really love now going to the Bull Moose in Bangor. I find now that when it comes to really low budget exploitation movies, their selection is pretty amazing. I also really love Bull Moose, Bull Moose in uh, Waterville, which I haven't been in a while. But when I have gone to Bull Moose, it's been mostly to Bangor. That was my last. I went there a few weeks ago, and that was my last trip there. And I got some killer movies and there's still a couple that I have to watch and also review, which I'm gonna eventually do. Also, but when I go to my second favorite place to go to is Goodwill in Rockland. I love that shop, but I typically buy kind of quote unquote normal movies there. I've gotten a lot of I pretty much have completed my Marvel MCU movies on Blu-ray. I'm actually a huge fan of the MCU. I've gotten really tired of a lot of the newer movies and I haven't stayed up on them. But I do love some of those films quite a bit. There's some of those, the Avenger films are some of my favorite. I love the one of the last ones I bought was Black Panther. I really love that movie. There's I'm a big Captain America fan. So some of those movies I really really love and I've completed pretty much my whole collection with all of those movies. With buying them at Goodwill in Rockland because they usually have a really good selection for that. But they also have a lot of DVDs. And I have bought, even though I try to, for obvious reasons, stay away from buying DVDs, every now and then I'll get a movie, I will buy DVDs there because it's a movie that is really, really cheap and I haven't seen it and, all those things. One of my favorite, more recent, well, got it quite a while ago, but one of the last big trips that I got, where I went to the Goodwill in Rockland, I got the Running Man, the Arnold Schwarzenegger version, the original. I got a really good collector's edition of that on DVD, and I actually really love that movie. I still haven't seen the remake, which I heard was not very good, but anyway. So every now and then, and today's show is on a movie that I bought. I think I got it fairly recently. I can't remember when. It was a few months ago. But again, it was one of those cases. It was well. I think I think I actually paid, and looking back, I think I actually paid a little bit too much for it. $4. In this
Oh,
day and age, $4 for a DVD is, I think, a little bit too much. But that's just me. So today's show is going to be on Clint Eastwood's FireFox, and this movie I actually bought. I can't remember when I bought this on DVD. It came out it came out in 1982. It was directed by Clint Eastwood. I'm actually a huge Clint Eastwood fan. So, and I haven't seen this movie since I was a kid. I remember seeing this once or twice when it kind of had come out when I was a little kid, and I got this quite a while ago at Goodwill in Rockland, and for for some reason I had shelved it. I very rarely I do. It's one of the things that sometimes drives me crazy about YouTube folks that I watch, without naming names, but there's a lot of people who are more kind of like into the collecting aspect where they just want to have it and know that they own a physical media version of that film, or whatever, and they just kind of and they use these terms like double dipping where they'll just buy a special edition of a movie just so they know they have it but they won't actually watch it, and they just kind of store it away, and they kind of treat their movie collection like it's like they're a curator and they're running a museum, and it's like look but don't touch kind of thing. And I don't get that, because to me, I try to very rarely do I miss a movie. I When I buy a stack of new movies, I usually watch them all right away, and then I do a show on them. Very rarely do I just like buy movies for the sake of buying them and kind of throw them in the back. Very rarely, but this occasionally that that happens, and Firefox was one of those examples, because I bought it a while ago, and for whatever reason I had thrown it on my shelf. And yesterday I was in my room and I'm like, oh wait, what is that movie? And I looked at it and I was like, Firefox. Oh, okay. Why didn't I watch that tonight? So I watched it last night. And again, this came out in 1982. It's directed by Clint Eastwood, and I'm a massive Clint Eastwood fan. The Unforgiven, so great, one of the greatest westerns, maybe the greatest western ever made. All of the great westerns that he directed, all the great westerns that he was in, so many great films. Movies like Mystic River, Play Misty for Me, The Beguiled. I mean, the list is endless, and of course, all his work with Sergio Leone. Just a great director. I really do think he's kind of an American treasure. One of my favorite movies of his, which is a movie that I don't know, it might be my favorite movie of his, but again, it's hard to say because there's so many. But I think one of my favorite movies he's ever directed, and also the other thing that's amazing is so many of these movies that Clint Eastwood has directed over the years, he has also starred in, which is kind of insane when you think about it, because in a lot of his films that he's also written and directed, he is starring in them, so he's in almost every shot, and I'm like, how the hell does he pull that off? Like that's kind of an astounding feat. I don't think Clint Eastwood gets the credit, because a lot of the times he is the lead role in a lot of his films that he actually directs and writes. But anyway, my one of my favorites, it might be my favorite film of his, is Absolute Power. I love that movie. To me, it's such a comfort movie. I've seen that movie so many fucking times. Absolute Power is like one of the best kind of thriller. I think it's one of the best thrillers he's ever directed. Gene Hackman is in it as well. Ed Harris, just a phenomenal cast. Laura Lindsay, just an incredible movie. Really great, just like a really good thriller. Such a great story, such an intense movie, and just yeah, I love that movie so much. It's got one of the coolest opening sequences I think ever. Clint Eastwood plays this burglar, and he breaks into this house, and there's this whole like huge, huge kind of opening scene around that is so great. And there's no dialogue in it, but it's just really cool. Great music. Anyway, so I was curious. I haven't seen Firefox since I was a kid, and I have been watching, of course, not a surprise, tons of movies from the 70s and 80s again. I just finished up the other night watching Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, and that came out in '82, and I absolutely adore that movie. I am a massive Wes Craven fan, and that version of Swamp Thing from '82 to me is the best, the best movie out there on a character that I love, and Swamp Thing's a character that I have loved since I was a kid as far as comic books. So when I saw, and that came out in '82, and then I saw that Firefox came out in '82, I was like, the same year, which is crazy. I was like, oh, wow, okay, great. So I decided to watch it. And this review is about, slash talk is about Firefox. And, again, $4 is a little bit too much for this DVD. And I have to say, I was pretty disappointed with this movie. It's the basic premise of the movie is Clint Eastwood plays this pilot who was a pilot, like kind of a special ops guy, worked for the Navy, flew all these special missions, these top secret missions, and he was also heavily involved with the Vietnam War campaign. Killed through a bunch of flashbacks. He was responsible for all these bombings when he was younger in Vietnam. Killed, tons and tons of people, tons of civilians, and we're kind of given this, indication that he is really kind of fucked up from all the things that he did. Post traumatic stress disorder, and just he's kind of a fucked up person because of basically all the atrocities that he committed. And so he is now out. The movie is about basically now he is out of the military, and the U.S. government has found out that Russia, and this takes place in the '80s, and this is definitely an '80s film, but the whole premise of the movie more or less is that the United States government, through the use of spies and covert operations, they have discovered that the Soviets, the Russians, have developed this plane, this jet that is uber high tech and basically is superior to every technology that any other nation has at that time, including the United States. And it's the most high tech plane that is just a flying death machine, and it can fly undetected through radar. It's totally self-sufficient. It has the most combative, or the most. It has the highest level of, as far as the arsenals for jets and planes. It's got the highest caliber, the most. It's the most lethal thing, and so the Soviets have created this plane called the FireFox, and they intend on basically manufacturing these, and the United States becomes terrified at this prospect, because the Russians will automatically be superior, and they can basically do whatever they want militarily if they create a fleet of these planes, and they're called the FireFox. So the government reaches out to Clint Eastwood's character, who is looked at as like the top pilot, and so they basically pull him back into the military to go on this covert mission to go to Russia and to basically steal the plane. And that's kind of the whole premise of the movie. And it's a It's definitely a thriller, a spy, definitely a spy thriller. There's actually a lot of action, and it's actually a pretty violent movie. I was surprised. There's some pretty gnarly kills in this movie, which I was not expecting. But it's definitely like an espionage, a spy thriller film. Definitely an action movie too. And I will say, like the first couple of acts, the first two acts of this film are actually pretty good. Like I was totally digging it. There's a lot of great suspense. He has to, Clint Eastwood's character has to. It's all, cloak and dagger. It's all undercover special operations. So he has to, wear all of these various disguises to be able to like infiltrate Russia and then eventually get into the military zone to where this FireFox is. And it's very dangerous. He's constantly being followed by KGB agents, and there's a lot of cool suspense. There's a lot of violence in this movie that I didn't expect, and it's definitely like a really good thriller. I was really into this movie, but once the whole scenario happens of where Clint Eastwood's character actually seizes the plane, the Firefox, and mans the plane, and is now the pilot of this, the basically the most insane and the most superior fighter jet in the world. For me, it was like I kind of checked out because it was. I will say that all the suspense and all of the kind of the espionage, the spy aspect that I really loved of this movie. Once it kind of moved to where his character actually got the plane, and now it was basically him trying to fly out of Russia and trying to outpace the Soviets who were sending jets after him, and him trying to find a spot to refuel. And once everything kind of took place and all the set pieces were now in the air around these chasing sequences with the jets and planes, I felt like all of the suspense and all of kind of the the intensity just wasn't as good. It felt like it kind of just fell away for me. The thing that was a little bit much for about kind of the second or third act of this film. Once Clint Eastwood is the pilot, and he does get into the Firefox and does fly it away. Once it gets in the air, I just felt like this movie just loses all its steam. And the thing I have to say, it's so hard to take anything seriously. Like it's Clint Eastwood as the pilot of this the most high tech and most powerful plane in the universe. I could not. It was like impossible to buy it that he like to. I couldn't believe it was hard for me to believe 1 second that he was going to be this pilot. Like I was never sold on it. It just looked really, it just felt really silly, and like it didn't make any sense to me anymore because here was this pilot who was responsible for flying all these campaigns in Vietnam, killed thousands and thousands of people, committed genocide, and then obviously goes through this phase of where he becomes mentally disturbed because of all of the atrocities he committed. So I'm like, okay, why would the military, and even though his character is like the best pilot that the military has to offer, even though that, but then he's obviously incredibly mentally disturbed. Why would the military go out of their way to get him to fly, uh, and to go on like the most dangerous mission, the most high stakes mission that's possible? Why would they know why would they go into it knowing that this guy is essentially, you know, he has lost his mind because of the war. Knowing that, why would they go out of their way to re-enlist him and put him in charge of this super highly, sensitive and dangerous mission? Like, it doesn't make any sense knowing he's like completely unfucking stable. Like, I thought that was a little bit ridiculous and a little bit hard to believe. And I know it's a movie, but it was a little bit hard to believe. And the other thing that I just was not, once he became the pilot and he was flying, once Clint Eastwood was the pilot and he was flying the FireFox, I just couldn't believe it. I was never sold. Like, it just looked so silly, and there was nothing believable about it. Like, I couldn't believe him at all being in charge of this equipment and flying this thing. It was so unbelievable to me. I couldn't. It was silly to me. And the other thing was, this Firefox is supposedly this you know really really high tech plane that's superior to anything that any other nation has the most advanced technology, defense system that you can imagine. And so, how was he as a pilot able to control and able to learn how to fly this plane so effortless? Like, there's when he eventually grabs this plane and flies it off, it looks like you get this feeling like he's flown this plane about a dozen times, and I just didn't believe it because I'm like, this technology is so incredibly advanced, supposedly, that the Russians have created, and no one else has had access to it. It's been this private, kind of military thing that only the Russians have had, and they've only had access to. So how would this American pilot, how in the world could he understand how to fly it so quickly? And he's also incredibly, mentally disturbed, PTSD from the Vietnam War. How is he able to adapt to flying this plane? And when he gets into the plane and flies his plane off, he makes it look like he's just kind of like getting in his car and driving off, and there's no trials or tribulations or just like danger, or like there's certain aspects of this technology I have no idea how to use, or like there's nothing realistic about it. And it was just so unbelievable. And like, he can't do anything wrong. He's like impervious to anything that the Russians throw at him. And it was just kind of silly. It was just kind of silly to me. It was totally unbelievable. Like, it was never. I couldn't believe for once that he was, his character was capable of doing what he was doing. It just, yeah. And I will say that the all leading up to the whole sequence of where he eventually gets in the plane and flies the Firefox, all up to that point, I thought this movie was really good. I thought it had a lot of great suspense, some really great characters. I was totally into it. I do love a classic kind of spy thriller film, but this movie definitely had that, and it had a lot of great action set pieces. It was really shot really well. The dialogue was really great, but once it gets into where the Firefox is now the main part and he's actually flying it as his character and steals it, I just felt like all that, it was never as good. All that build up felt like it just felt like it was anticlimactic to me. It wasn't as exciting. And it just was silly to see him flying this, like, I couldn't buy it. I couldn't fucking buy it. Once he got into the plane, was flying it around. It just seemed silly, and just, very very cliche. The whole story is pretty cliche about, that whole thing of somebody who was part of an organization or had a specialty job, or was, maybe this incredible military guy, well, like in this case, or, that whole scenario that we've seen a billion times where someone has had enough of a certain job or a lifestyle and they were really good at it, and then they decide to quit and leave it, and then the powers that be come and try to bring that person back, and then we've seen that kind of scenario a billion times, and this movie has that tenfold where it's like wicked cliche, and it's like, oh my god. And then the acting, I will say, throughout the movie we see glimpses of Clint Eastwood's character where he's starting to get these like attacks from his trauma, and from being in the war, and the acting during those sequences as is absolutely horrible. Sorry, they're it's really bad. And I think, you know, this is definitely not one of the best Clint Eastwood movies. And I can't remember if he wrote this. I'll have to find out. But he directed this movie, and I don't believe that this movie was very successful when it came out. It's got a very big budget. It's a big movie, big, a lot of action, big set pieces, big elaborate scenes, and it came out in '82. And I don't believe that this movie. I think this movie bombed, and I can kind of see why, because it's kind of a terrible movie. It's kind of dated, but not in a good way. And again, you know it's like taking Clint Eastwood's character and putting him in these circumstances. It's just I didn't buy it at all. It was so well, cheesy and just unbelievable. The other thing too about this movie, the other thing too about this movie is it drags. It definitely drags ass. It kind of feels. It kind of feels when it gets to the point of where the FireFox is actually captured, and Clint Eastwood's character is actually escaping. It kind of feels like that the movie is going to kind of end. And again, I hadn't seen this movie. I saw this movie maybe probably at least two or three times when I was a kid, because I remember this movie was on cable, and we might have rented it on VHS, but it's been, 1,000 years since I've seen this. And my dad it still is a big Clint Eastwood fan, so I remember seeing a lot of Clint Eastwood movies. He liked the American movies, though. He wasn't really into the spaghetti westerns, which are really my favorite. So, but anyway, which I think are the coolest movies he ever starred in. So, so it's been years, and I will say that this when it gets to that point of where the Firefox is captured, and Clint Eastwood's character is flying it uh, out of Russia. It feels like the movie is kind of maybe it's gonna wind down, maybe it's gonna come to an end. But then the movie just goes on and on and on. And I will say this movie is drags. It drags. I feel like this movie's way too long, and it's overstuffed. And it's a little bit it feels like I don't know, it almost feels like there's two different movies, because the first, two acts of this movie are really good kind of espionage, uh, a really good suspense thriller, like kind of like a classic spy thriller, but it's got really great action in it as well. It's great writing. It's really good. It's really entertaining. But then when it comes into the sequence of where the plane is captured, it feels like then it goes on, and it feels like any of that tension that was kind of established, and kind of the thriller aspect that is a big major part of the first two acts of the movie, feels like all of that tension gets, if it was a balloon, all the air is getting squeezed out of the balloon, and it 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 loses all of that. It loses everything that really kind of built this movie into being something that was cool. If like the momentum goes, and it feels like it kind of becomes this other kind of movie, and it never for me it was never as thrilling, even though the second, third or fourth act of this film, if you want to call it that, there are bigger set pieces. There's a lot of giant set pieces involving the FireFox being chased and outmaneuvering, blowing up helicopters and boats and all these things. It's never all the momentum for me at least was gone by that point. Yeah, it was weird. And it felt like it was two different movies. And right when I felt like the movie, when I was watching, I felt like, okay, this is where it's probably going to end, or it feels like this is maybe a good place to end. Then the movie just goes on and on and on, and that's where I was like, and then on top of that, I was like, he's, why is Clint Eastwood's character like all of a sudden Superman flying this plane? Like there's nothing can touch him. You never see him like, you know, in any phase of the movie where he is, you know, under pressure or can't figure something out. He's like he makes it look like he's riding a bike and he's driving this, the most advanced jet on the face of the planet. It just was silly. And I put this movie in, probably about 9:30, and I was up till about 12:30 watching this movie, and I was like, man, this movie, and I didn't even finish it. I ended up getting tired at the end of this movie, and it wasn't even the end. And I was like, oh man, I need a break, and I'm so not digging this movie. So I did not finish it. I did not, and I didn't make it all the way through. But I put the movie in, not realizing how long this movie is. And when I got to that point of where I felt like, okay, maybe this is where it's going to end, and it feels like this is, mission accomplished. The U.S. has now seized the Firefox, and I felt like, okay, maybe that's where it's going to wind down. But then it just kept going on, and again, it felt like it became another movie. And at that point I looked it up to see how long this movie is, and it's 2 hours and like 20 minutes, which is pretty long, pretty long. But I will say that it felt like it was more like 3 hours and 18 minutes. Yeah, it really drags, and this is not. I love Clint Eastwood. Don't get me wrong, and there's so many great movies that he's directed, so many great westerns he's been in. Most notably, of course, all the great films with Sergio Leone and all the spaghetti westerns. This movie is not one of his best. It's really not, and I can see why watching this movie now, that why this movie was not a big success for him, because it's not very good. It's kind of it's definitely one of the low films in his career. Yeah, and it was a shame because I was into it. I was into it, and then all the momentum, just fell away. So, 1982. Again, it's one of those things where I always find it interesting, and again, I just watched Swamp Thing, and granted, it's a totally different kind of movie or genre. More of an exploitation. It's a fantasy. It's a horror comic book movie, but the '70s and '80s are my favorite decade, and I love, like, when I watched, say, you know when I was watching Swamp Thing, like, that movie has a lot of dated qualities. It's really silly and goofy, and it's a goofy kind of low budget monster movie, essentially. That is kind of an exploitation movie. It's kind of like a B movie, and it's goofy and silly, but it's super fun, and it's very dated. It's totally dated. It's totally like when you put in and watch that movie, it's like, it's exactly when it's from. I mean, that's like It's pure 80s. And here we are in 2026, and you can tell that Wes Craven, when he made that movie, and everyone involved in that movie, like, they set out to make a good quality movie. You know, it was one of the first kind of comic book movies, you know, one of the first comic book adaptations that ever came out. I mean, it's 82, so that's, you know, was it like maybe, yeah, well, after, yeah, it came out after Superman, I believe. But so one of the first adaptations for a comic book character. And Swamp Thing was a pretty popular, or is a popular comic book character, and I've always loved Swamp Thing ever since I was a kid. But they're clearly having fun. There's some levity to it, and you know, and it's a fun movie. You could tell that they had fun making this movie. And yet, Wes Craven. I mean, Wes Craven's one of the, you know, one of the. I think when it comes to horror films and just being a horror director, I think he's one of the most important directors that we've ever had in America. It was I was very sad when he passed away because he was still pretty young, but he's a legend, you know, and kind of, you know, when it comes to horror directors, one of the greats, you know, one of the greats. But again, that movie's very dated. You know, automatically it's like pure 80s, pure 80s cheese. But watching it now in 2026, it's that case of where something can be kind of bad or so cheesy that it actually makes it super cool and fun and enjoyable. And so all those dated qualities actually have that reverse effect where it actually makes that film even more enjoyable and satisfying and just cooler. And then you take a movie like Firefox, where again, I know it's a totally different kind of a film, and that's a Firefox at that time was like a big studio film. But it's interesting watching that, you know, going from Swamp Thing, which came out the same exact year as Firefox, and you have Swamp Thing, which is this very low budget kind of B movie exploitation movie, monster movie, and then you go to Firefox, which came out the same year, which is a big studio movie. And at the time that this movie came out, Clint Eastwood was a pretty big, you know, he was very established at this point because, you know, he had done all of the spaghetti western films, and then he was making some of the American westerns, and then he had also directed. I mean, Play Misty for Me, that movie that I think it was his first movie he ever directed. That movie's a masterpiece, and that's, you know, amazing. So you know, when he made Firefox, he was clearly established. You know, I mean, he was one of the biggest names in Hollywood at that time. And when you watch this movie again, it's super dated. You know, automatically it's in from 1982. It's total like total 80s vibe, and it's dated, but it's one of those things where it kind of gets bad, or it's kind of bad to where it's so bad it's still kind of bad. It's not. It doesn't have that cool factor to me. It doesn't age well. So I always find it really interesting on that kind of thing. You know, like what makes something so bad that it's good, and then what makes something where it's just kind of bad, it's just kind of a bad movie. I always find that really interesting and fascinating, like what does that. And I know it's subjective, but I think this is an example of that, where Swamp Thing is cheesy, kind of ridiculous, and totally the case of it's so bad it's good, or it's so good it's so bad it's fantastic. Firefox, it's so bad it's kind of bad. So yeah, I would pass on this movie. There's a bazillion other high quality Clint Eastwood movies you could check out. Not a very good movie. It drags ass too. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.